Prior to last season, the Boston Celtics and their fan base were gearing up for yet another strong year under head coach Brad Stevens. They had just signed Gordon Hayward, drafted Jayson Tatum, and traded for Kyrie Irving in late August. On paper, they had all the makings of a team that could challenge for a top seed in the Eastern Conference. Leading up to their season-opening game against the Cleveland Cavaliers, expectations were at their highest since the previous Big Three era ended. But as we all know, Hayward suffered a horrific season-ending injury on opening night, Irving was shut down late in the season with knee issues, and although the year ended better than most would have expected given the circumstances, just a single game away from an NBA Finals appearance, that season turned out to be another step up the mountain rather than one in which they reached their peak. But with LeBron James now out west for the first time in his career and little roster turnover from a year ago, this Celtics team looks to be one of the best in the NBA. My name is Tucker, this is Sporting Logically, and here's my 2018-19 season preview for the Boston Celtics. Leading up to this summer, I was really intrigued by what the Celtics might do. Both Terry Rozier and Marcus Smart proved to be incredibly valuable in the postseason once Irving went down. And although it was pretty well known how important Smart's contributions were prior to Kyrie's injury, Rozier's play came as a bit of a surprise. With Smart being a 2018 restricted free agent and Rozier being the same in 2019, there were a lot of ways things could have played out for Boston. They could have let Smart walk depending on the price other teams were willing to pay, or re-sign him and trade Rozier, or keep Rozier and package Smart plus some picks for an all-star. In the end, the Celtics picked door number 4, bringing back Smart on a 4-year $52 million deal and putting off the Rozier situation until next summer for now. This gives the team not only one of their best defenders, but also a change-of-pace scoring guard off the bench behind Irving. The other notable re-signing of the summer for Boston was bringing back big man Aaron Baines on a 2-year, $11 million deal. He was a critical part of the Celtics being so good defensively a year ago, and even showed some occasional floor spacing ability in the postseason when called upon. He isn't going to be someone that a lot of people talk about, but if they hadn't managed to bring him back, then they'd be forced to count on Daniel Tice, who had a solid year but had some injury issues of his own, or rookie first-round pick Robert Williams III. Neither of which are ideal players to be counting on for a team with finals aspirations. All in all, the offseason was about as uneventful as you could have expected heading into the summer for the Celtics. As always with a team that has the kind of assets they do, they were linked to a number of different disgruntled stars around the league that could possibly be traded. But in the end, they stood firm and chose to grow around their unique mix of both veteran and young talent. Bringing back Smart on a deal that is pretty good value when you consider that a team could have thrown a huge offer sheet his way and put them in a tough spot is ideal as well. Not that I would have expected anything less from a Danny Ainge managed team, but Boston did about as well as they could have without swinging for a big trade given the circumstances. Even though the Celtics have one of the most complete rosters in the league, I do have some things that worry me relative to the other top teams in each conference. I'll be getting to a lot of the positives in the next section, but for now let's take a look at a few concerns. First up, let's take a look at how their offense performed in the regular season a year ago. They had the second highest three-point percentage in the league while still being in the top 10 in attempts, which is good, but their offensive rating and assist numbers aren't ones that point to a championship caliber team. Obviously, it's important to keep in mind how injuries factored into these numbers, but ideally you'd like to have a better offensive output out of a team with the kind of aspirations the Celtics have. In general, teams with an offensive and defensive rating that are both in the top 10 of the league are considered to be well balanced and of championship caliber. And although Boston's well-known defensive prowess was up to the task, their offense certainly lagged behind. Now, as I said, when Hayward went down and then later in the year when Kyrie was shut down, the entire offensive hierarchy shifted significantly. As the year went along, a lot more of the offensive responsibility fell on Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown than was expected at the beginning of the season. And although they both did an admirable job filling in, it wasn't always the most efficient production. Beyond that, they were relying on guys like Marcus Smart, who has well-documented issues from 3, and Al Horford, who is a great player, but is more of a complementary option than an offensive focal point. You might say that this issue would be solved with the return of Irving and Hayward to full health, but that solution isn't without its concerns either. There's really no telling how good Hayward will be in return from such a gruesome injury, and because it happened just minutes into their season, he has basically no experience playing in live games with any of his teammates. The kind of offensive cohesion required to win the conference isn't something that happens overnight, nor is easing back into a strong comfort level coming off such a serious injury, which could result in a smaller contribution than expected from the former All-Star next year, especially in the beginning of the season. In the case of Irving, he was able to play a good amount of the season and look just as great offensively as you would expect, but with an injury history now littered with knee issues, durability could become a concern for a team that really can't afford to lose the offensive firepower he provides. Other than that, my only other real concern is how the return of Irving and Hayward to the lineup could affect their defensive rating compared to the other top teams in the league. They were still a top 10 defensive group when Irving wasn't sidelined, but he obviously isn't as good of a defender as Smart, and it's tough to predict where Hayward will be on that side of the ball as well. I believe in Brad Stevens and his system on both ends of the court, so I do expect them to still be a top 10 defense even with those two playing heavy minutes, but it is something to keep an eye on as the season progresses and they try to round themselves into championship form. Okay, now with all the negatives out of the way, let's start looking at some of the good stuff. Danny Ainge has managed to put together a team that is, on paper and when healthy, one of the top 2 most complete rosters in the entire league, and has the necessary size, versatility, and skill set to be considered a legit contender in the East, and if a few things go their way, in the finals against whoever comes out of the West as well. As such, the expectation for the Boston Celtics next season should be a top 2 finish in the conference and an Eastern Conference Finals appearance, with a pretty good chance to represent the East in the finals. As far as I'm concerned, last year's Houston Rockets and this year's Boston Celtics are the 2 teams best equipped to take down the KD-era Warriors since the infamous 4th of July decision from which they were formed. Offensively, they have the shooting ability to keep up from 3, and in contrast to last year's Houston team, they have a variety of offensive weapons at their disposal, making it much more difficult for Golden State to focus on just one guy the way they could with James Harden and Chris Paul. On any given night, either Irving or Hayward or Brown or Tatum could have it going offensively, and if you give them too much attention, the other guys off the ball are good spot-up shooters, but can also attack and make plays off of closeouts, something that couldn't be said about most of the Rockets' perimeter players last year. Defensively, Boston has great size and length to be able to play bigger or smaller lineups with varying degrees of effectiveness, and an ability to even switch their starting 5-man, Al Horford, onto perimeter players and stay in front on dribble drives. This has proven to be the most effective formula for defending the Warriors under Steve Kerr. Switch every screen so as not to give their deadly shooters any space at all, and live with the result of the mismatches that creates. At any given time, the Celtics could put a group on the floor that features either Irving as the offensive focal point, surrounded by versatile wings, a different group with Marcus Smart in replacement of Kyrie that allows Jaylen Brown and or Jayson Tatum to be the primary option, or a super small unit with Irving, Smart, and Rozier on the floor at the same time, with a wing and a big to really pick up the pace. That versatility and ability to adjust and adapt to so many different situations is what I think separates Boston from anyone else in the league. The Warriors have their 4 All-Stars, the Rockets have their system and 2 high-level ball screen and isolation players, the Lakers have LeBron, and the Raptors have some good depth around Kawhi and Kyle Lowry. But the Celtics have a 9 to 10 man rotation that can, in theory, execute any offensive or defensive game plan Brad Stevens wants them to. And that is why I think they'll win the East this coming season and give the Warriors a true test in the finals, with as good a chance as any team in the league to potentially take them down in a 7-game series. They've managed to keep their roster from a year ago intact and are bringing back 2 All-Stars to a team that nearly made the finals without them last season, and they have one of the top 3 coaches in the league on their side. There are obviously things that could derail their season, such as injuries or some struggles integrating Hayward back into the lineup, but in the end, their depth and versatility set them apart. Behind the GM wizardry of Danny Ainge, they've set themselves up as the favorites to not only be the first team to represent the Eastern Conference without LeBron James on the roster since their very own 2010 Celtics team, but with their youth and future draft picks still available to possibly be the future of the East and the league as a whole. And there it is, my 2018-19 season preview for the Boston Celtics. Next up is my long-form series titled Feature Friday in a few days, so be on the lookout for that. Once again, my name is Tucker, this has been Sporting Logically. If you missed any of my previous Monday, Wednesday, Friday videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.